Hi, I'm Jan Shegda. Welcome to our discussion on NTs, or Rationals, temperament group with the Myers-Briggs. So we'll talk about what an NT is, a typical career path for an NT, what not to do to them, and how to build connection. And last, we'll finish up with a tip of the day if you are an NT or if there's an NT that you know. So if you're an NT, this means you have NNT in your four-letter Myers-Briggs type. So that would be INTJ, INTP, ENTJ, and ENTP. And this is the smallest of the four temperament groups. It makes up 15% of the U.S. population. Rationals are abstract and utilitarian. Abstract means that they want to look at the meaning behind a set of data they get. So what's the principle or overwhelming idea about that set of data? And they use that information in a utilitarian way, which is, okay, now that I have this idea or principle, how can I use it in a way that works more effectively? So, like we talked about with the idealists who are N and F, anybody can have a feeling preference or a thinking preference, but it's different when you have it as part of your main temperament style. N and T, right? So even if you're an ESTJ, you're still a thinker, but it's not all about the brain like it is for NTs. NT, intuitive thinking, is a very logical, rational type. What they're about is what's most efficient, what's most logical, practical, innovative, ingenious. Oh, that's the way I never thought of that before. That's so interesting and fascinating. Higher education is a place that NTs really thrive, particular types of NTs. Some NTs don't see the need for an actual system of higher education. But the fact that higher education is more focused on theory and application of ideas, growth intellectually, that's what NTs are all about in one form or fashion. Really what they want out of life is, in some sense, to be left alone and go their own way. They're very independent. They usually have an idea of how to do things that's different than the world around them. They're abstract and utilitarian, which means they're the exact opposite of guardians. Guardians, if you remember, are concrete and cooperative, and they're the dominant group in the U.S. So if you're a rational, you have the unfortunate position of being directly opposite of the biggest group in the world in which you live. So that can be a little frustrating. Some rationals have the experience that everyone's doing things wrong, everywhere they go, and it's partially because of that. They're living in a world created by people with very different values. What are the values for a rational? Well, figuring out what's the most efficient and effective way to do something, to think about something, all those things are very important. So in terms of what a career path pattern would be or what they gravitate to, typically things like math, science, engineering, some kind of research or statistics, certainly higher education, if they're driven to education, would be the place you'd find them. Politics at times, any kind of upper level management or strategy. Again, ideas people. So if you think about someone that has a job that has to use big ideas and use their strong mind consistently, that's often an NT. So, career path pattern for NTs. Let's talk about education for a minute because it's a little different for NTs than for the rest of us. High school is usually pretty frustrating for most NTs. It's not the way they choose to think. When you think about developmental thoughts and how most of us don't really develop abstract thought until, I think they say, between 18 and 22. Somebody correct me in the comments if I'm misinforming people here. But NTs are the group that really come to that abstract way of thinking very early. And so it can be frustrating for them to be in more of a high school situation where it's just, this very concrete data where you learn and then recycle that information to someone else isn't all that inspiring to them. So that can be pretty frustrating. And then when they get to college, the style of learning is usually much more their cup of tea, and many NTs do go on to get advanced degrees. Usually when that happens, it's either the INTJs or ENTJs. The Ps tend to have an experience of college as kind of a waste of time. Yes, I'm learning something, but why do I really need this certificate or degree or someone else to tell me that I've learned something? Why can't I just go do it? And like most things, the NTs have a point. Yes, you don't really have to have this in most situations. So for that reason, NTs often will go out on their own and do entrepreneurial work in one way or another, because then at least they get to go on by their own rules and not have to do things a particular way. But in terms of career industries, like we talked about, engineering, math, science are big places that you'd find NTs initially. And the career path pattern, the main commonality with the career path pattern for all NTs is always that they're very competent and effective at the jobs that they're doing. But if they have a problem, it's usually a political problem. And what I mean by that is they're rubbing their supervisor the wrong way. Maybe their supervisor is a guardian and wants them to do things a particular way, and the NT doesn't see the sense in doing it that way, and so doesn't comply and be cooperative as he or she is expected to be. So if NTs do tend to rise up through the ranks pretty quickly and effectively, because again, they are very competent, they're very strong-minded in terms of IQ, they're higher IQ than the rest of the groups. But if they don't get along with the people they work with, then those people are going to block their success and their upward trajectory. So in my work with NTs, I usually try to help them focus on not just what they know, but also how am I affecting people, and how is that part of my effectiveness as well? Not just what I know, but how other people are experiencing me at work if they're in a corporate environment. Very true in education as well, which educational settings can be very political places. That's another reason why many NTs decide to go off on their own, because then they don't have to deal as much with some of those political issues, but they still have to deal with customer service issues, which can also be a challenge. An NT sitting in some kind of a customer service, customer-facing role as a dominant part of their work is pretty stressful and not something that you want to force an NT to do for any length of time. So that's the career path pattern for NTs. Next, we'll talk about how to connect with them. Best way to connect with an NT is to meet them on their level, which is be very brainy, very, very well read, very educated on a particular subject, and share information with them. NTs love to learn. They may or may not be readers, many of them are, but often they just want more and more information about the subjects that interest them. So if you know what subjects interest them, be a source of information for them. Or debate. That's, intellectual debate is something often that NTs enjoy as well. They can have a little bit of an offbeat flavor to them, again, opposite of guardians, so the things they like to do may be more off the beaten track, or brainy pursuits, like going to a lecture, or this is a really kind of stereotypical example, but when you think of like Star Trek or Star Wars, often that's kind of an NT's dream. They're more attracted to those kinds of, pop culture things. So, but connecting, basically focus on the T and the ideas. So anything new that you're reading, anything interesting you've come across, something you heard on the radio that's different, provide them with those sources of information. Things not to do. Well, one thing you don't want to do is act like a guardian, which means tell them about what's expected of them socially, or just in society at large, of how they should do something. Really don't like that. And often they'll say, well, there's no point in me going to your great uncle's birthday party with you. I've never met him, and you've met him once in your life, and so why would we spend our time that way? Or why do I have to spend 10 minutes small talking with someone I don't care about at a party when we're not even actually saying anything? So you can see how NTs can sometimes have a point, and they can be a little anti-society in some senses when we think about all the things, all the social niceties we do just to get along that maybe don't have all that much value. NTs are quick to point that out. So don't force them to do those sorts of things. Just don't fence them in. They're very independent people and need their space. Also, don't overwhelm them with a lot of emotion or drama. That's a quick way to see an NT shrinking towards the door. And tip of the day for our NT friends is find points of connection. Because NTs are so brain heavy, sometimes they're only focused on that way of being in the world. So when I'm saying find points of connection, that not only is relationships, but maybe gather information from your body and your emotions. Interact with the world in a new way that's not just about logic, and see what you might learn in a totally new and exciting way. Thanks for joining us. See you next week. We'll be talking about Enneagram subtypes. Bye-bye.